Hey guys, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in today's live stream chat, we're going to talk about flexibility in your preps and in your plans and in your lifestyle. I think that one of the major stumbling blocks for a lot of people in a lot of emergencies and in a lot of major world or just personal life changes is simply going to be a lack of adaptability. A lot of us get stuck in a rut. We live our lives just day to day doing the same things, often falling into habits where if something throws those habits off, it actually has a ripple effect that affects the rest of our life because we rely so much on each day being the same, being able to do the same things the same way each day. And that's just going to be deadly in a lot of situations when everything falls apart from every direction. So this comes into play in a lot of different arenas of prepping, from just your everyday lifestyle, the things that you need for inputs, your debt, all the stuff that just makes modern life complex. These are all things that will make any form of personal or regional world emergency just that much harder for you. The more simple your lifestyle, the less stumbling blocks you're likely to run into when you have hardships. So like I said, things like debt, things like just habitual ways of doing things could be problems whenever things start getting hard for you. And we start to get into our actual preps. This is how you prep, what you are prepping for. Could be backing yourself into a corner if that's not what ends up happening. A lot of people are planning for some kind of martial law or international war situation. Hey, Hooples, how you doing? Seems to be on. I don't know. I'm just sort of talking into the wind here, hoping you show up. So, hey, how you doing? We are talking about how lack of flexibility is going to be one of the major downfalls just for people in general in life and for preppers specifically in emergency situations. So that is, let's say prepping is just a hobby for some guy. He thinks that if he buys guns and MREs, his family of 5 pre-adolescent kids, he and his wife are just going to be able to weather any emergency that comes on. But whenever that emergency comes down, he might find out that, yeah, he's got some MREs, he's got some bullets, but he has no flexibility in his lifestyle. He still has mortgages to pay, but no job and no other skills. He's got all kinds of debt. And meanwhile, maybe there is a lot of things changing in society that he's not prepared for. Maybe you have all these things, all these obligations in your life that you still have to fulfill while having no ability to fulfill them because everything is changing. Exactly. No plan stands after first contact with the enemy. Right on, Steve. So I was talking with a fellow audience member, Prepper's daughter, and we were having a good conversation about how just the chaos of a lot of emergency situations is going to be one of the first things that undermines a lot of preppers. Preppers sort of do think that they will have these big showdowns, sort of movie scene moments where they need to filter the water, they need to fight the marauders or whatever. But in a lot of situations, it's actually sort of the out of left field events that will really affect you. And it's going to be rigidity in your lifestyle and in your preps that's going to be your downfall. So like I was saying earlier, being debt-free, having a simple lifestyle, having few obligations is really one of the things that's going to help a person out. Exactly. Options are going to be the key to getting through a lot of situations. You look around, a lot of people's lives are chock full of obligations, responsibilities, and just the complexities of modern life. And a simple job loss is enough to make everything fall apart. All of their kids' activities and schooling and everything, it's all just being juggled and held together in this very fine mesh, basically supported by the way that the modern world and society works. Hey, Wandering Veteran, how you doing? Exactly, hooples. And not just habit. It's people. We live our lives so intricately. It's not a question of should I take on more responsibility. It's where in the puzzle of my life can I fit this responsibility. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I do live a simple lifestyle. I don't reach as far as I could. I do plan on going to college and doing more with my life. But at the same time, the simplicity of my lifestyle has served me well multiple times. I've never gone into debt for a car. I've always owned sort of a crappy car. But as long as you know how to fix it and you don't go into debt for it, you own it outright. And you don't have that responsibility whenever you lose a job or you move. Being debt free has been one of the major blessings in my life. I also haven't had jobs with so much responsibility where I can't go and take care of family matters. Like recently, I've had a lot going on, and being debt free allowed me to not need to worry too much if I had to walk out of my job whenever I had a lot of serious drama going on. And having a pretty open schedule aside from YouTube allowed me to go and look for another job. And then whenever things changed dramatically with my first job, now I'm just working at two places, often up to and over 13 hours a day. So my ability to sort of hop around and just change my lifestyle to fit what I needed to be doing was a huge blessing over the past couple months. And it really struck me that if I had a lot of responsibilities, I might not have been able to just change my schedule and adapt to the way that things needed to be. A lot of people really do have places that they have to be every day, all the time. And while I'm not coming down on people who have full lives, it is a question that you need to ask yourself of how adaptable your lifestyle and the things that you do are. If you have to sacrifice some of your activities or responsibilities, is that something that is going to be its own SHTF for you? I'm not sure what I'm planning to study. It keeps changing. Probably psychology, probably some kind of leadership thing. I'm definitely planning on getting a welding certification, going to a trade school outlet, and learning how to weld. I think that is one of the most practical skills that a person can have, no matter what the future brings. How old am I? 30. So yeah, I think, and that's something that I mean to talk about once I've got a little bit of experience with it under my belt. But just as a throw out right now, I think, yes, one of the most practical trade skills that any person can have is welding. Nursing. Yeah, I've thought about nursing. I could do it for a while. I'm not sure that I could make it last long enough to make it worth the investment of getting into it, just because of myself. But I have thought that it would be very good to at least get under your belt. But yeah, for welding's a little less involved to get into. I don't think you need to go to as much school to learn how to weld. And I think that it is also a skill which you can use anywhere and anytime, no matter what happens. They're going to need welders, whether there's ever an SHTF or not. And so that just ties back into adaptability. Both nursing, welding are things, leadership skills are all things that will suit a person no matter what the world is like and no matter what life brings them. A lot of people in today's world are very specialized, like extremely specialized, to the point where if they don't work specifically for the corporation that they work for in their position, they essentially have no marketable skills. I'm lucky enough that while I've never made a whole lot of money, I have a wide range of skills that basically allow me to walk in above entry level into a job in most places with some level of my own discretion. I'm not beholden to just the job market. So I definitely think that it would be better to be sort of a jack of all trades and a master of none from the prepper's perspective. and even just from the everyday perspective, looking at the '08 recession and how many people who had specialized jobs found themselves without marketable skills. So nowadays, I definitely think that it's valuable to be able to market yourself in different ways and be valuable in different fields than to simply make a lot of money in one field. Hey, Browsard Homestead, how you doing? Yeah, Hooples, I can see the robotics being a problem, but at the same time, um, it's going to be at least a generation before robots can do all the things that welders do. Um, you know, I'll get my, you can get your scuba welding certification. I'm pretty sure it'll take a while for robots to swim under a boat. But no, I agree. I just think that it's something to have, and especially as a repair skill for grid down type situations or slow collapse, being able to weld vehicles back together, being able to fix home appliances, just all kinds of stuff, being able to fabricate things. But then again, nursing uh, is one of those skills that's just going to be valuable no matter what the world is like. People are always going to need their bodies fixed. Hey, Fireplug. But yeah, so these, just this is how I look at things: is will it be valuable to me whether the SHTF happens or whether it doesn't happen and we enter some postmodern technological AI society, post singularity. Hey, Uncle Al, how you doing? 3D printers can kill handy persons. Yeah, I was actually just talking about that at my restaurant job. We were repairing the plumbing under one of the dish pit sinks, and those, sink the sink to plumbing fittings can be a little bit of a hassle because rarely are they the way that they should be. They're usually sort of rigged together. And coffee servers next to go. It's true, Hooples. I think that it's important to consider all kinds of futures. The prepping community typically focuses on collapse, SHTF, catastrophic futures, and not enough on the postmodern futures where let's say that there is some secret hidden technology or form of resources that they have been holding back because it doesn't suit the profit-driven mindset. Let's say that the super rich 1% elitists behind the scenes, if they are there doing anything in a coherent fashion, that they are actually just letting us think that there is the possibility of a collapse of a resource scarce world just in order to isolate their place of power. And right whenever it seems like things are at their worst, they let us all know that there's some free energy source or something like that. But they have already, secured their place of power. All of a sudden, there is no catastrophic end, and preppers have to find a way to integrate into perhaps a total control grid society, or a society where there is a universal basic income, and a lot of the jobs that preppers do are basically useless compared to snowflake jobs like singing and stuff like that. That's not necessarily a world that a lot of preppers are preparing for. They're preparing for the collapse. But let's say that the catastrophe is that something comes along and doesn't allow an economic collapse to happen. Let's say that we move away from money somehow. I know that that sounds ridiculous, but what if it happened? Would preppers be ready for it? So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about whenever I talk about adaptability. If you are so focused on an economic collapse or World War III or martial law or a food crisis, whatever it is that ends up happening and isn't that thing may simply undermine all of your preps and actually leave you worse off than somebody who wasn't prepping at all. So it's very important to always keep an eye on left field and see what's coming out of it. See you, Hooples. Oh, nope, I don't have a few hours for this. Just a brief chat about adaptability and maybe a little chat with you guys, and then we go. So a couple other thoughts that we had on this topic were, for instance, and this is something that gets talked about, at least in the right channels, is let's say your house burns down with all your preps in it, or there's a giant marauding horde of 500 people who literally just scan their way across cities and go door to door and strip them bare and kill anybody who resists and assimilate anybody who they deem worthy. Let's say that a meteor is reported that it's just going to hit right in your neighborhood, or it does while you're at work. Any number of things. There's a sinkhole and your house disappears. Whatever it is, let's say that your preps are gone. Are you able to reproduce them using your own skills? Would that ruin you? Would you be unable to continue from that point on? Exactly, Fireplug. You do have to consider that maybe there is someone behind the scenes and they're watching us and doing things to undermine all the things that preppers do. Not a lot you can do about that, but you do want to, like I said, keep your eye on left field. Most of us are not nearly prepared enough for the basic upfront stuff to even worry about most of this. But at the same time, a lot of us are painting ourselves into a corner with our preps, and that's going to be deadly. Really, it is the stereotype of guns and bullets over water and beans is true. A lot of people are more rational than that, but even then, a lot of people are focusing on the EMP. The EMP is a very interesting scenario because it gets us prepared for a lot of different scenarios, but it's not very good to focus too much on one thing. And I'm not talking down about the tabletop exercise or anything like that. I'm just talking about the tendency of the community to focus on trends like Yellowstone or whatever, and not necessarily just basic things like the slow collapse and the loss of jobs and the death of modern industries. Hey, Chasing Life, how you doing? Yeah, I think Hooples, what Steve was saying was that the unknown future that people are living in is just the way that the world is going. Even if you just live in the mainstream, the world is a very uncertain place, just with how much instability it seems is going on. Now, a lot of that is played up by the media, and most people don't care nearly as much as is portrayed on the internet or in news media. Yeah, Chasing Life, glad you're here. Doing all right, thanks. Glad you're well. So I don't think that America is as divided as we're told. And I think that most of our division is directly caused by hype. But if you follow all that, or even if you just really look at events in the world, the future seems really uncertain. And there are a lot of people who are living in that mainstream future, which, as we preppers know, is just generally a bad thing to do. It's so uncertain what will come that it's a very bad idea to sort of live in what the news media tells you is what is going to come next. So from what Steve was saying about living in the present rather than an unknown future, I think what he was saying is live in your present, be prepared for what's in front of you and what's obviously going to come next, rather than trying to live in some future based on the mainstream or based on prepper trends or supposition. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people really buy into this is the collapse. And I'm not just talking about the fear porn crowds. I'm talking about even ourselves. People in this community have been a little bit hyped up about things that have come and gone. So I'm always trying to give myself a grain of salt, because I do tend to believe that something big will happen in the next 5 years that we will look back on 20 years from now and say that it was a turning point event. But at the same time, I even feel silly just saying that, because I will not be too surprised if 10 years from now I look back and say it's only been a slow decline or just a weird holding pattern that is almost eerie. So for a nice little analogy, I think that prepping, rather than painting yourself into a corner, but should be seen as painting outwards, building outwards from yourself. A lot of people view prepping as a threat-based exercise. They want to know what the threat is and what they need to do to prepare for it. And that's working backwards. And that's the whole point of what I'm getting at here. A lot of people get into prepping because they recognize a threat. They feel threatened by it. They want to protect themselves from it, basically by putting up walls against it. So let's say somebody works in economics and they realize that we're sort of due for a depression. It's just a part of the regular cycle of economies that you have a boom and bust. And there's a fair argument that it's been held off for a while due to strange market patterns and perhaps by manipulation. So there's a lot of people who get into this by saying there's definitely going to be another Great Depression, almost certainly in our lifetimes. And so they prepare specifically for that. These might be our gold stackers and those types of people, or maybe even Bitcoiners. So they're trying to prepare against a threat, and they're completely blind to everything else. Now, dedicated preppers may start looking at multiple threats and insulating themselves directly against those threats. The preppers that I tend to respect are those who have identified the lifestyle that they want to live and altered it to the point where it can be as sustainable as possible. So you've got a sustainable lifestyle that you enjoy, and you find the ways to isolate that from threats and to find a way to sustain it no matter what happens. And I think that that's the way that a person needs to prep to be adaptive. Find your base lifestyle and find a way to insulate that against anything that might come. Give yourself a rock hard, stable core. And I don't mean that as in a rigid one. I don't believe that having a house full of stuff and a large bank account is necessarily an indicator of a prepared prepper. I think that the ability to walk away from everything is just as important as the ability to gather everything. See you wandering. Have a good one. Catching up on chat here. Yeah, exactly, Hopefuls. I'll bet you $1 million that the SHTF happens, and I'll pay up after it happens, but only if dollars are useless. So anyways, I derailed myself by reading the chat, but the basis of this is that I worry that a lot of preppers are rigid in their preps, or they do have these hidden sticking points that could be their downfall. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be family that is not in on their preps. You can't necessarily get people ready to just do whatever is necessary. And it's hard to get your family up and moving if they don't believe that a threat is viable. But I think that it's very important to ask yourself how you're prepping and what you're prepping for, and if the way that you're prepping is sort of backing you into a corner where you're not going to be able to react properly to other things that come in out of left field, or that the way that you have to react to them is going to cause a ripple effect of bad changes for yourself. Hey, Systemic, how you doing? Nice to see you too. The cash cushion. Yeah, so cash cushion, just all, insulating your lifestyle, getting it where you can sustain it no matter what happens is, to me, the basis of prepping. I've been thinking a lot about what prepping should be to distill it as something rational for regular people. Because I do have the conversation of prepping pretty often with regular people just off the street or people who I work with. I find it pretty interesting to see people's reaction to the fact that I'm a prepper. And to have that conversation and find out what they think of it and sort of try to change their perspective of it. Hey, Alaska, how you doing? And I'm always looking to see what is the most rational way to, share prepping with somebody. There are many facets to it, and a lot of people think it's sort of crazy. But at the same time, there are a few very basic ways that people can go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I try to find those, sort of distill the ways to present it to people. And for me, one of the most rational ways to present prepping to people is just simply having a lot of the things that you like. People who drink a lot think that it's pretty cool to have a liquor cabinet that's full. People who like food, whenever you say, well, it's just sort of nice to have all the things that you need to make all the meals that you need for a couple of weeks in advance, they can understand that. People who like to go out and have fun in the woods, four-wheel, and shoot guns and stuff, they can understand having to want all the stuff that you need to go camping and have fun ready at a moment's notice. So if you sort of find the way that people already enjoy their lives and sort of present prepping as a way to make sure that they can always do that no matter what happens, is a good way to present prepping and break the ice with people, because most people are not very worried about the eventual collapse of society. But a lot of people don't like inconvenience. And so I tried to present what I do as just good, smart ways to avoid inconvenience. So I simply tell them, I like to have all the food that I enjoy around. I like to have plenty of gas in my tank. I like to have all my camping gear in the back of my car. And I like to have all my goodies and the things that I enjoy plenty well stashed up, so I never have to worry about going between paychecks and running out, or the store being out of my stuff for a whole week, or whatever. I never have to worry about that kind of stuff because I just go to my cabinet and grab another one. And people think that's pretty cool, and they can sort of get behind it. All right, see you, Hooples. Happy late Canada Day. It's true, chasing life. It does get boring. And sometimes I do avoid it or just cut the conversation off if I can tell that they're pretty closed-minded. But I do find it interesting. I think that it's sort of important to inject it into the conversation, get people realizing that it's not just something that crazy people from TV do. Especially around here, it's actually not that strange because almost everybody either homesteads or knows someone who homesteads or knows a prepper or something like that. So not as strange as if I was in LA or New York or something where people are just fully ingrained into the modern mainstream lifestyle, because people have been exposed to it a little bit. They know that they live in North Idaho. So I think that's most of what I had ready. I might have missed a couple things, but the main basis of the conversation today is to ask yourself, oh, Reed's in, how you doing? Yep, trying to talk some sense, sort of failing. Basically just talking about how the failure to adapt to your circumstances will be your downfall and not some random threat that you think is coming. Hey, Rick, how you doing? Exactly, Rick. There are certain things like that where you can tie it in, just sort of break the ice and make it not even, have to talk about prepping. Now, I talk about prepping. I tell people that I'm a prepper just because I like to throw it in their faces. I have a little bit of disdain for modern society and for people who don't think about these kinds of things. So I like to sort of throw it at people and see how they react. Because it's funny, a lot of people my age and younger have this sort of view that, of course, there's going to be some kind of collapse of society. Of course, things are going to, there's going to be some kind of SHTF. They have this sort of fatalistic perspective, which maybe they don't truly believe, but they sort of joke about it. But they have it in the back of their minds that, oh, yeah, I'm ready for the next plague or whatever. And I sort of like to, have that conversation. Well, I sort of think that there's going to be another Great Depression or a plague or something, might wipe out half of us. I don't want to be one of them. And that's literally what I'll say while making food with one of my coworkers. And they ask, what's my YouTube channel about? I say, well, I talk about doomsday prepping, but not like the TV show, from like an actual, what if a Great Depression or the Black Plague came back? And they go, oh, yeah, I guess I sort of think that might happen. And I say, yeah, well, I just make sure that I'm not one of the ones that dies. And it's a little awkward, I think. Not for me, but I think that people do sort of, I don't know what they think about it. Sometimes they say that that's very interesting and they ask me a lot more about it. I've had quite a few people who do watch my channel from work and stuff like that because of that conversation. It's very out there for a lot of people, but in 2019, I think that it's hardly one of the most offensive things that people can encounter. And yeah, emergency preparedness. It really depends on the person. If they're a little older, I do go the emergency preparedness route. Depending on the person, I talk about how I grew up as a Boy Scout and how I was always doing hikes and expedition style stuff. So I just like to have all my gear in my car for if I just choose to leave work and go camp. A lot of, if they're a working type guy, I share how I like to keep my axe and shovel in my car in case someone calls me up and needs something done. So there are so many different ways to come at this. And I think that that's one of the best ways to be a prepper, is to have a lot of different ways that you prep. The crazy preppers are the ones who say, well, the UN is definitely going to invade the US, and so I'm preparing for that. That's crazy. I mean, that might happen, but it's crazy to think that that's going to happen, to prepare for that to happen. It's not crazy to think that there's going to be a food crisis. It is crazy to assume there's going to be a food crisis and prepare only for that. So I think that the most rational thing is to realize all the things that could happen and try to avoid them. And I think that a lot of people can get behind that. I didn't catch that one, Reed. Die from a toothbrush? Yeah, Bob Bradley. If I lived in a place where there were natural disasters, it would be a much better segue. North Idaho does not. It has inclement and sometimes somewhat extreme weather when it comes down to I mean, not nearly so much. It doesn't get below freezing so hard as Canada, where Hooples is. Rarely does it get down to -20. But so, like I said, it's pretty moderate, despite the fact that it gets, you know, a lot of snow and stuff like that. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have earthquakes. We don't really have much. And even blizzards, anybody who's lived here for a while either enjoys it or is only minorly inconvenienced, or they say they hate it, but they don't move away. Now, me, I love the snow, the blizzard, the whatever. I can get around. I can enjoy it. You can always gear up and adapt to the cold. There's only so much you can do about the heat when you're stuck in it. Yeah, see, fires and earthquakes in California. I don't know. We get a lot of smoke from the fires in Washington and stuff like that. But even that, like, I've pulled out my N95 and worn it whenever I'm outside and stuff, because I was actually getting discolored mucus, you know, snot from the smoke. I was actually starting to truly feel it, you know, the last time it was getting really bad. But, you know, it's sort of, that's almost still a little silly to be like, hey guys, better wear a mask. I mean, it's not silly. It's good common sense, but you're not going to convince anybody to become a prepper by being like, look guys, I've got all these N95 masks, just because it's red and smoky outside. When you live somewhere where there's fires and earthquakes constantly, it makes a little bit more sense for people, for you to just be like, look, I'm good at this. When the earthquake hits or when the fire hits, we're on. Yes, Corsair. Smoking gives you points of immunity versus smoke. I've actually wondered that. When I was a smoker, I often wondered if you would be able to, you know, deal with a smoky environment better because you're more used to that. But I sort of feel like the constant inflammation of your lung tissue might put you at a disadvantage to somebody who hasn't. See, I've got points because I smoked a pack a day for a few years, and I smoked for 10 years, but now I haven't. So I have the strength and the callous lungs, but they're healed. So right now I'm at my peak ability to run through smoke. I think I have heard that having smoked counteracts OC spray, probably because of the fact that most of your tissue is scarred at any given point and the other half is inflamed. But yeah, systemic, I agree. I have been there. And sometimes I do, depending on the person, just not even bring it up. It really does depend. And depending on where you live, your life circumstances, it's not really worth talking about prepping with people. You don't necessarily want everybody thinking that you're a crazy person if opinions do matter based on your workplace or your lifestyle. I'm the kind of person who I don't really worry too much what people think about me, and I sort of have the luxury of that. So I use that. If I deem the situation to be appropriate, I bring it up. I think that it's a perfectly reasonable hobby to have. I think that compared to a lot of the people who, I mean, most of my coworkers want to hurry and get off work so they can go sit in front of a TV and drink beer. And I've done similar things for vast hours of time in my life, so I don't really talk down about it. But when it comes to, do I think that my hobby is something to be ashamed of? No. I like to go camping. I like to have plenty of the things that I like. And I like to be basically a grown-up Boy Scout. I like to be prepared. And if people have a problem with that, then I don't really get it, to be honest. So I'm not worried about that. And exactly, Rick. Even if I don't mention prepping, for whatever reason, eventually people think that I'm crazy. I might be. I'm definitely different enough that I might as well be crazy my way rather than whatever way they're going to end up assuming about me. You sort of at least get a little bit of respect when they realize that you do something that requires at least a little bit of motivation beyond a passing interest. I saw something about that. I mean, I don't drink Jim Beam, but that's a tragedy. Bourbon, it doesn't deserve that. All right, we had our moment of silence. Drink Knob Creek. Jim Beam's going to be about as expensive as this anyways. Yeah, I saw that, Reed. That garden is looking nice. Lately I haven't been able to comment as much because I'm usually watching videos while I'm on the move, but I like your garden. I've often thought that if I had my own land, I'd probably not have grass lawn. I'd sort of prefer a rockscape with patches of growth. So I sort of like what you have going on there. Hey, Backwoods, how you doing? Exactly. Oh, and the negative energy in their life, Reed, I agree with that. A lot of people, I think that we become desensitized to how serious or whatever the subject is. And we take it for granted. But I think a lot of people, when they face that, when they go, whoa, you really talk about that? I mean, that's some serious shit. I think that that's sort of serious. A lot of people just sort of like to have a light and happy worldview. And the idea that the modern world isn't just completely isolated from the ugliness of the past, it's not something that they really like to have an in-depth conversation on, just middle of the day, Yeah, Reed, I sort of noticed the gasoline, the fertilizer, the weed killer, just everything. I don't know why you wouldn't just rather have either something that can grow wildly and look decent, or just have some decent kind of something else, like a rockscape, even just gravel with use with things on it for you to do. Oh yeah, being retro. People don't mind retro if you sort of like it's sort of becoming cool to do early 1900s stuff integrated into your lifestyle. A lot of the fashion design or accessories are a little bit retro. I'm actually thinking about being a little bit 20s during the 20s. I'm not a very fashionable person, but I've considered getting a little bit of a suit and stuff, a 1920s style suit. I really like the fashion that men had back then, the stylable suspenders and hats and stuff, cigars. So I think that I might unironically, and I know that a lot of people are going to do it, and I'm not a hipster. So I would probably pick a working class kind of guy, not necessarily like a zoot suit style, because I'm not a fancy clubbing kind of guy anyways. I wouldn't mind having a nice suit, and I would like to have it trimmed that way. But I also like the working man's style of clothing from back then. So I'm going to look into that. 1820s. I don't know. I would have to make my own clothes if I went 1820s. Pantaloons and stuff like that. Could be good. Just brown wool. If you watch, I follow a channel that occasionally puts up videos of how people dress throughout history, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, you go back to like the 1700s, getting dressed as a woman was a lengthy affair, and a lot of the clothing wasn't like what we think of it as. A lot of it was like just a square patch or a round patch that you wrapped around yourself and tied up. Legs were usually just a tube. You just had two leg tubes and then tied them up with Now that was quite a while back, but it's very interesting looking at all the different styles of clothing and why you had a vest to cover where the seam was between two halves of your shirt or whatever. Lengthy affair today. What are you talking about, Backwoods? I put my pants on 2 feet at a time. You just sort of step out of them at night, step into them in the morning. Yeah, Reed, history channels are great because, the authentic ones, the ones that are really sharing how it was, because people lived differently. Life was a hassle back in the day. I mean, you got up early because you had to take some time to put your clothes on before you even stepped out of the bed. And by the way, it was cold. Houses were not sealed up. You could often just see outside your house. A rail rider. Yeah, sort of the baggy clothes and stuff. No, I've been meaning to sort of look up some of the 20s fashions and decide on one that I like that won't be too expensive to. Said women. Did I? Oh, about how women dressed and stuff. Well, that's because they focus on the women's clothing a lot, but men do too. Like you're talking about, like I think one of them was a 1500s shepherd's clothing with the leg tubes and stuff. I'm sure men dressed like women back then too, Backwoods. Yes, it still takes ladies a long time to get dressed. Yeah, Reed, fires will be a big problem in grid down. That's one of the things I think it's really, I mean, it gets mentioned, but it gets underappreciated in the community. Like sort of what I was talking about with the EMPs. All right, see you, Rick. Have a good one. Thanks for dropping in. A lot of the time when we talk about EMPs, we don't necessarily start off the conversation with fire hazards. Depending on the circumstances and a few different things, and I may be wrong about this, one of my main concerns with an EMP is that it will start fires in houses. It may or it may not. During the Carrington event of the 1850s, that solar flare induced so much energy into the telegraph wires that they caught their rubber coating on fire. And those were just telegraph wires. So you think about the size of our national grid. I mean, that's a gigantic antenna. Everybody be bad. All right, Rick, we'll be sure to be bad. Yeah, the transformers. See, and people are skeptical of that, Reed, because they say that there are mineral oils in there. And I don't think that matters. When a lightning strike hits one, it explodes when it gets too much energy. Hey, Palmetto, how you doing? And I know that an EMP is not a lightning strike, but yes, gas pipelines. I've wondered about that. So back to the transformers real quick. The power lines are a gigantic antenna, and they get overloaded with energy. Every transformer on the grid simultaneously becomes overloaded and explodes. So I think the first thing that you'll notice when the EMP happens isn't, hey, my phone's off and everything else is off. It's going to be a deafening boom as every transformer in earshot goes off all pretty much at the same time. And when those go off, they shower spark debris everywhere. See you, Alaska. Thanks for dropping in. You have a good one. Backwoods is spot transformer fires. So yeah, transformers, let's talk about your breaker box or wherever, where your line feeds into your house. That's going to have all that energy, and it's going to be ending somewhere. So you might be looking at multiple items in your house or your breaker box becoming red hot. The wiring in the walls of your house may be long enough to induce enough energy to start fires within the walls of your home if you catch a flux of the energy, because the radio waves, well, the EMP energy can, I believe, focus and disperse depending on where you are and how the atmosphere is working. So if you catch a good bit of that energy, you might have a fire starting in an appliance or in your wall or in telephone or power cables crossing your yard. Yeah, I understand, Steve. I didn't necessarily think that you didn't think about it. And you were trying to really I know what you were trying to do with that, and just insert simplicity to get people really looking at things from ground zero, from step one, rather than worrying about all of the random background noise. Yeah, systemic, I do. If we're worried about EMPs, I do worry about anything with a metal coil, any long-standing wires, anything that hums with electricity. Those are all things that I see as potentially exploding in sparks or glowing red hot during an EMP or solar flare situation. The E3 pulse. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for backing my thought. I thought that was right about that, Reed, and I have mentioned to people that a lot of the danger isn't the actual initial pulse, but actually if the Earth's magnetic fields move down, you would see an aurora borealis, and you would know that the Earth's magnetic fields are actually down at ground level rather than up in space like they should be. And that's where the concentration of energy is so powerful that it's just dumping electricity into stuff. But some people have disputed that and told me that it is always just directly the EMP energy that does it. Yeah, so you're connected to miles and miles of wires, and that's all trying to dump into your house. So yeah, the fire hazard, just a lot of things and this all ties back into the adaptability. For instance, if you think there's an EMP going on, are you going to be able to hurry and drive home and see if there's a fire happening? Or are you sort of going to be worried that you have to stay at work and not get fired for leaving? So there are different situations where adaptability, the ability to, or having a cache. Is that dispute over? I know that we were arguing about that. I say cache, but I sometimes say cache to appease the Frenchies. And yes, I have heard that the magnetic fields are not as stable as they've traditionally been. But that's affected by a lot of different stuff, both the Earth and the sun. But if you want to talk about a solar flare or an EMP outside of part of the magnetosphere, it's ripples in a pond. The magnetosphere is a shield. Is a ball, if you will, of magnetic energy, and all of the cosmic radiation that is streaming from the sun that would normally just strip the Earth bare is caught and swirled around and actually captured. So part of the magnetosphere is charged particles from solar radiation. Normally it sort of swirls around and creates a protective barrier, but during solar flares and EMPs and stuff, a lot of that is actually pushed down to ground level. So it's a concentrated layer of that stuff, where normally it does come down a little bit. There are little bumps, and that's what the aurora borealis is if there's a minor solar flare, it causes a swirl to come down and hit ground level, essentially. There are some places on the Earth surrounding the North Pole where the northern lights are very common or near constant sometimes, and there's almost no ability to use radios, and there is somewhat of an EMP effect that could fry stuff that's particularly sensitive. And people know not to go these places with sensitive electronics that might cause a plane to fail or something like that, because exactly, the magnetic field already exists at ground level, but the parts that we don't want to be inside of don't tend to come down here. And this is all just my understanding of my research. I'm by no means an authority on this stuff. Reed's going to be far more knowledgeable about this than me. But yes, anybody who knows, like Steve said, we used to live on Mars until this happened there. That's what they say. So back to what Reed was saying earlier. What is the team? I got my aluminum hat right here backwards. Cash, yes. Yep, keep out. No one gets in with this thing on. So Reed was saying earlier that during an EMP, the gas pipelines might be in trouble. And I sort of agree with that. Gas pipelines can go boom, and EMPs can make things go boom. A pipe. Oh, yes. The, what is that German hat called? Pickelhaube? All right, that's enough of that. They overpressure if the pumping stations are not regulating. That's not good. Yes. Yeah, Palmetto. During the I don't know about 1860s, but during the 1850s Carrington event with the EMP and stuff that, or the solar event that destroyed the telegraphs and things, they could disconnect the battery from the telegraph and still operate it, and then soon it caught the rubber on fire. And then, yes, people were seeing the aurora borealis as far as south as Nevada, and not necessarily in the pitch black at night. See, I've gone back and forth, Palmetto. I've said cache and cachet. I don't even know how the French say it. I'm sure they say cachet, but I think that Americans generally say cache. Okay, Backwood says the entire pipeline system relies on pumping stations along the way to increase and decrease the pressures. But at that point, it'll be the least of our worries, sadly. I agree. Well, it'll be a pretty big worry if you're right next to one of them, I think. But just generally, yeah. Oh, come on, Steve. The French have not always only surrendered always. Palmetto, I believe that there has been an event of similar or near to that size, but it wasn't pointing at us. In fact, recently there was a pretty ugly one And it wasn't, I think it passed in the same hemisphere of the solar system that we were in after we had passed, like, so we weren't in threat from it, but it wasn't going the opposite direction. But you have to remember, when a solar flare happens from the sun, there's an immediate pulse of light speed energy that will hit the Earth within 8 minutes, and but all of this goes out from the side of the sun that is its source. The sun eclipses one half or most of it from whatever surface activity is sending out a solar flare. Nice backwoods. I like that. I'd actually, sure, I'll take that from you. A nice French rifle, depending on which one. I've often wondered about train lines, Reed, if they would like glow red hot. That could be ugly. Oh, so the gas pipelines themselves are acting as inductors. Okay, I was just thinking of if pumping stations explode and the whole pipeline goes up, but you're talking about the gas pipeline itself inducing energy. Really, manifestations. That's interesting about the CIA story. So anyways, when a solar flare, CME, which is a coronal mass ejection, that's literally a bunch of mass matter coming off of the corona of the sun. It's directional. The sun blocks most of the other side of it. So depending on where we are and depending on if we jump in front of it, a lot of the solar flares that happen and CMEs that happen just fly off into space, or we catch the tail end of them as we fly through it. So there's the first EMP pulse that goes out, and then there's the CME, which can take up to 2 or 3 days to travel out to Earth's perimeter. And if we get in front of that, that's where a lot of the damage may come from, because it's a big mass of charged particles, which essentially just push things in front of them. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Reed. Another thing that you verified that I've tried to tell people, grounding doesn't work because the ground itself is already, may well be, is this correct? That the ground itself will not necessarily work as a ground because there's so much standing energy. At least that's my understanding, is that if you make a Faraday cage and then ground it, the ground may actually have more energy in it than something else. But I am curious about your answer to Palmetto's question. Interesting, Backwoods. I don't really know, Anthony. I think that probably your best bet would be to find out how to have some kind of actual breaker outside the house where you could have your line feed in through that. So it will take the, it'll flip the switch before, I don't know. Okay. So yeah, the Earth itself acts as an antenna and induces current. So if you have a Faraday cage and then you ground it, you might actually be picking up more from the ground than what you're picking up from your little Faraday cage, essentially. So the question, Reed, is what can a person do to ground out? If you have your house connected to the grid, can you do something to isolate it from the grid when that happens? Okay, well, Palmetto, Reed's the guy. I've been meaning to start talking to Reed because he has apparently the in on some of this information that I want to be sharing. So a fusible link. Yeah, something like that. I don't know enough about it. But yeah, I think I might email Reed and get the down low on some of this, and then we're gonna start. I'm gonna light the fire under him to start sharing this stuff, because every time I talk about something that I think people need to know, he's the one who knows it. Not every time. You guys all know all kinds of stuff, but start putting videos out like every day, Reed. You don't have anything else to do you? But then, you know, the EMP may never happen. I do think that the water thing is, you know, one of the most important things is getting as many people as possible prepared to produce water for themselves. Holy crap, Reed. I actually was wondering that if there'd just be so much energy that would arc a fuse's gap and just keep going. And that's the thing is, okay, Hooples asked what I was thinking about studying when I go to school. There's not enough time to study everything that I need to know. I want to learn electrical engineering. I want to learn advanced water purification. I want to learn psychology and leadership skills. I want to learn welding and all kinds of other trade craft. I want to learn a few languages. I think that if you're a dedicated prepper, there's no end to the things that you could be wanting to go to school for. I definitely don't see it as a way to find a career. I see it as a way to gain a lot of different knowledge. Career in the Army, I've thought about it multiple times. I don't think so for me. And I don't know. How old will they even take you? I'm 30. I'm sort of getting close to where they're just going to end up needing to pay for my health care before they get too much out of me. $38. 35. You can be president at 35. I mean, why join the Army? I might as well start campaigning now. I mean, I'm sure I could find a job in the Army or in the military anywhere. I've got enough non-physical skills aside from the ability to, you know, Reed, I have actually just always been waiting for an email from a CIA handler. I mean, I never went to an Ivy League school, but I figured they'd find me eventually. Just kidding. I don't want that. No offense, federal government, but I've seen movies before. I know what you do. Yeah, I need to get my ham license. Yeah, like hackers. Exactly. And scam artists that look like Leonardo DiCaprio. Is that who played that? We're here to help the government. Oh, yeah. Tell some stories about the FBI, Reed. Oh, yeah, the NSA, definitely. Oh, I know, Reed. Hey, you're closer than most of these guys. still be a decent trip to meet up, but I mean, if you were already coming north and I was already going south. Special agents. All right, guys. Well, I probably should be wrapping this up. I got to be getting ready for work here soon. Oh, yeah, Reed. I would love to meet up. I've often considered that it'd be awesome to do a little bit of a train trip. Oh, yeah, 2 jobs. Not today, just the one today. For a while, I was doing, 1 each day or 2 each day, but I'm starting to line up the schedule a little bit to where I'm just pretty much working every day, but 10 hours. But yeah, I'll be heading now in about 5-10 minutes. What do you guys got going on today? Anybody already off into 4th of July stuff? Yeah, Palmetto, I'll make sure to schedule out at least one day here and there, but as long as I have enough time to take care of other stuff and rest up, I'm good. Right on, Palmetto. Well, yeah, take it easy then. I can't remember. Did I watch yesterday's video? What was yesterday's video, Palmetto? My days blur together sometimes. Oh, the wood tissue one. Yes, that was a great video. Like I told you, they all blur together. Yeah, no, I really like that one. I want to try that out someday. And I like your idea about the bamboo. I saw the comment on my mobile, but I didn't end up responding to it. But yeah, like a bamboo is what I was thinking of. Something like a bamboo with something else shoved into it. I do wonder if there are any trees where the bark is watertight enough that you could just cut it and it would just itself be a nice little tube. Watching water drip. Yeah, that's the main thing. My main problem with water purification processes. I have a family of 5 people, and I'd like to let them have more than just 1 or 2 gallons a day. So 10 gallons a day, let's say 20 gallons a day to be not just scraping by on water. Ideally 30 gallons a day. So what I'm looking for is a process where I can easily and with a reasonable amount of time and energy input, filter and purify 30 gallons per day for my family. That's the eventual goal here, because anything short of that is a failing option in a lot of grid down situations, even just really, really basic grid down situations. So whenever I'm looking at my charcoal filter or we're talking about distillation or just whatever, know that in the back of my mind, I'm asking myself, how many of these do I have to have and how much time will it take to get 30 gallons a day? I'm not sure where it's at outside my house, Palmetto, but it's not far down. Right here in my area, I'm almost on an even keel with a couple of lakes. So if it's not just sitting right under the ground in some places, it's there. But I can also, if I, there are multiple directions where I could shoot a bullet and it would land in flowing water. So thanks, Chasing Life. I appreciate you being here. Right on, Reed. That's awesome. And I'm confident that you could share something like that. Now, to be fair, in my area, there's plenty of wells, there's plenty of water that's nearly already drinkable, and which would be totally drinkable in most situations using basic filtration methods. So I'm not necessarily too worried myself about being able to get water, because I do know a lot of people with wells. I do know clean water near me, and most of the water near me is not susceptible, is not going to readily be dumped with stuff if the grid goes down, unless someone goes and does it. So I can say with a degree of confidence that most of the water that I can get should be readily pretty easy. My main concern is people who live in watershed areas where they can pretty much guarantee that most of the water has stuff they don't want to drink. I'm talking about people who live in cities where their idea of flowing water is a concrete channel that flows through under highways and stuff. Oh yeah, Palmetto. Not just glacial, but also seasonal, like a whole bunch of seasonal runoff. It's actually around here, it's often sort of difficult to find somewhere where it's comfortable to swim, even in the heat of summer, because a lot of the water is like shocking cold from how cold it is because it's a lot of it is not that far from being snow runoff. Oh yeah, Palmetto. No, one of the main reasons that I don't go swimming as often as I do, and some people do, but I don't like the cold shock of jumping into water when it's blazing hot outside and the water is really cold. And depending on which stream or river you're in around here. Now, I'm not so sure. I actually just moved here a couple years ago, and I have not swam in all of the water around here. But like up north where I was, a couple hours away from here, it is year-round snow runoff. So even a couple miles away from the mountain, the river is, you gasp when you jump in. If it's 80, 90 degrees outside, it's shocking. So yeah. You can go, and there's plenty of springs in the hills because of all that water. And the hills are tall, so you get a nice spring at the bottom of it. It's got a nice clean reservoir back behind it. Yeah, agricultural runoff. Yeah, exactly, Palmetto. If you're not seeing it come out of the ground, it's suspect. See you, Steve. I'm behind you by just a couple minutes, probably. So keep your eye on Reed, and I'm going to start chatting with him and get some of the goods from him, maybe behind the scenes, because I think that distillation and stuff like that is important. Yeah, exactly, Palmetto. Reed is he says he's planning to share how to deal with that kind of problem. And, I mean, this is something that people deal with. People deal with this in the third world far more than we do here. I mean, you want to talk about the nastiness that they put in their rivers because of the factories that exist in the third world. They're trying to get people, good, clean drinking water out of a river that's got cobalt and all kinds of nastiness in it. So there are methods that can get you clean water. So that's something that I think that we need far more than pretty much anything that's going on in the the YouTube prepper community right now. Gear, whatever. It amazes me that the knowledge of how to remove anything from water isn't just common knowledge in this community. So I think that that's one of the most important things that we could get out there, and I appreciate Reed for planning on that. All right, guys. Well, I do need to get ready for work and head out. So I appreciate y'all being here. and the awesome chat. It's been really productive and informative. Oh, I did see that. Who was it? Chasing Life, were you asking me about the sketch? Yes. I did sort of forget about that. And I will find a way to get that out in a way that people can print it or save it for themselves. I do plan to provide better information about how to filter, but for the everyday man, I do think that the one that I drew out is a pretty decent filter that people could use to get some clean water. So stay tuned with Reed and eventually myself to share something better, but I will get that out. Exactly, Chasing Life. Treat all water as suspect, and then treat it, filter it, purify it using as many methods as possible, as carefully as possible. Anyways, thanks, guys. I appreciate you all being here. Appreciate anybody who rewatched and stuck around to this point. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you all have a productive day, and everybody stay safe out there. I will catch you later. Yes, filtration. Stay tuned. Memes for morale later on today. All right. Have a good day, everybody.